So let's have a look now at some of the more man cave orientated accessories and modifications that I've done personally to this particular vehicle. So my fridge just sits on the back seat and is able to be utilised even when the ignition isn't on. On that same basis, if ever I need to use that rear seat, I've fitted an Anderson plug, a 50 amp Anderson plug, to the second battery, again permanent live, so that I can put the fridge into the tray and then still plug it in. I've got a connector that connects from the fridge to the Anderson plug. So to the front of the vehicle, here I didn't want the canvas type seats. I wanted something that was a bit more comfortable. These are proper lamb's wool seat covers. Drawback of them is that they can be a bit of a nightmare to keep the dust out of. However, I've got an airline and which I blow all of the dust out from them, and that tends to, if I do it sort of every few weeks, that keeps them clean. It certainly protects the upholstery underneath. UHF radio, always a bonus in and around this area, needing to talk to the truckies, or if I'm driving in the back lanes, sorry. It's important to know if there's any wide loads coming, and they all transmit on channel 40, so that gets used all the time. I opted to go for a projector battery monitor, so I've fitted a second battery for this. I'll show you that in a second under the bonnet. And I opted to go for a battery monitor that was inside the vehicle that I could see at all times. This is a plain simple one, it's not programmable, it just gives me the voltage of each battery, the top one being the starter battery, the bottom one being the auxiliary battery, and so that I know at any one time where the battery status lies. I've also got inside the fridge, which is not working at the moment, but inside the fridge I keep a Bluetooth temperature sensor, so that again tells me what the temperature is of the fridge from the front of the vehicle. Next up is a throttle controller. The throttle controller was recommended to me by a friend of mine who's got a ute who wanted a little bit more response. What they do is they simply plug into the fly-by-wire that goes from the throttle into the engine or into the wiring loom somewhere, and they just break into that wiring harness. And this particular one is programmable, and what it does is it spools up the turbo a little bit quicker. So to be blunt about it, it's a bit like slamming your foot on the throttle and getting a quicker response, but you don't have to slam your foot on the throttle. If you program it into performance mode, you really notice the difference with this, and I can thoroughly recommend getting one of these. The manufacturers say that because they're not touching the engine, there is no issue with the warranty. That I can't guarantee. I don't know. I'm quite happy to have this. It's plug and play. You can unplug it, you can plug it in. As I said to you, as I said earlier, I have chosen not to do any engine modifications because I don't want to affect my warranty at this stage. I may in the future, but certainly at the moment this is about as far as I want to go. But it's a very valuable and reliable piece of gear that definitely works, so I can recommend them. I've had a pod made for the back of this vehicle. That's not something I'm going to go into or review now particularly. However, when it's on the back of the vehicle, I can't use the interior mirror, of course. The side mirrors, even with the tray on, are probably not quite wide enough. In fairness to them, they were not designed for the tray, they were designed for a tub. So until I get some wider mirrors, and the ones I want are about $800, so it's a bit of a justification thing. Until that point, I decided that I would fit, which I've got lying around in the man cave, a rear view camera. This particular camera is the type of one that's fitted for use as a reversing camera, and all I've done is just wired it into the ignition system where it gets its power from, rather than from the reversing system where it would normally power a reversing light. So this one effectively means that there is a screen inside the vehicle which is live all of the time that the engine is running. So if we just come into the vehicle itself, I've placed the screen down there. I don't want the screen where it's going to be a distraction, of course, but if I start the car up, you can see that there is an image behind me. So if I need to see what is behind me at any one time, I have that facility should I need to. So let's have a look under the bonnet. The first thing you'll notice is the telescopic struts. They were a simple eBay purchase, fairly inexpensive, and an awful lot easier than having to take the weight of the bonnet and prop it up with the bonnet stay. Right from the outset, I decided I wanted to have a second battery. Second batteries are always a good idea if you want to power something like a fridge or external lighting, perhaps if you're out camping, that type of thing. ARB do a battery carrier and system for this particular vehicle in cooperation with Red Arc. So I invested, and I do feel it's an investment, in the battery box that fitted this perfectly. The BCDC 1225 is what I went for the charger, so that's a DC to DC charger. So this battery is not charged from the alternator, that is the second battery, which is the one over there is the second. This of course is the primary starter battery. So the second battery is not is not charged from the alternator, but is charged from a DC to DC charger, which works extremely well. Red Arc tell me that the battery will charge to 100% of its capability, as opposed to using things like smart solenoids, which will only charge it up to about 75. I'm no expert in that field, but that's how they tell me. The Red Arc charger fits really nicely. You can see in the center of the screen there, alongside the battery holder, and all of the associated wiring goes in really easily. Now, I'm no auto electrician, but I've got a little bit of experience in relation to the wiring up and fitting of wired accessories, etc. And this was a pretty easy thing to fit. One of the lessons I did learn was that as I was wiring up things inside of the vehicle, such as the UHF radio, the battery monitor, the protector battery monitor, I ended up, because the way through the firewall was behind that battery, I ended up taking the battery out, feeding a wire through, putting all the battery back in again, and did that probably 6 or 8 times. I should have given it a little bit more forethought and just fed 6 or 8 wires through to start with, and then put the battery in. I would only have had to have done it once. The green wire at the back there is an extra wire, so in the future if I plan to put anything inside the vehicle, that wire automatically goes through the firewall. I've made it a reasonable size wire. I think that's about 4 millimeters square, so that will cope with most things I will have to fit inside should I decide to fit something else. Also onto this vehicle I fitted 2 spotlights. You saw those on the front of the bull bar, but they weren't fitted by the dealership, they were fitted by me. I went for LED. The headlights on this vehicle are LED, and although the headlights are exceptionally good, they light up the road in front of you really well, but the cut-off between where the light finishes and the darkness starts is very stark, and therefore you have to have them adjusted just right. Otherwise there are bits of the road in front of you when you're on dipped beam that you just can't see, and that's actually a safety issue. But coming back to the spotlights, these particular ones are excellent. These were all wired in the man cave. obviously done through a couple of relays, or done through one relay. I actually had a light bar on the roof of this vehicle, but I removed it because there was too much reflection off the bonnet, so I'll just now stick with the 2 spotlights at the front. But I've got a spare, so these 2 relays, one is for the spotlights on the front, one was for the one on the roof, so I've got a spare power source should I decide to fit any more lights on the front. They're obviously wired through the high beam circuit which supplies the relays with their power. Under the car as well, under the engine, I decided I would fit more protection underneath. There is already some steel protection for the sump and the underside of the engine. However, as I mentioned before, kangaroos out here cause a phenomenal amount of damage to vehicles when they're struck, and therefore I decided to go for one of these underbelly steel protection plates. This particular one is a spurious one, but it's good enough for what I need. I think this particular one was about $180 or something, delivered off eBay special, but it's perfect for what I need. So again, as mentioned before, the engine on this is untouched. I haven't done anything with the fueling, I haven't done anything with the exhaust, I haven't done anything with the ECU or any of the electronics, because I don't want to adapt the I don't want to affect the warranty, but the vehicle has more than enough power for what I need anyway, especially with the throttle controller. That makes it far more responsive, and this particular vehicle does what I want it to do. It's acceptable on fuel. It could be better, but it's acceptable on fuel. Performance is certainly acceptable. The ride is very good. The quality of the dash and the layout and the quality generally of the vehicle is, I think, is excellent. And I'm glad that I bought this vehicle. Would I have been happy with a Ranger? Perhaps, maybe. Who knows? I've never had one, so I don't know. But I'm happy with this vehicle. It's got to last me for at least 5 or 6 years, and so far it's proven to be a very good vehicle. It's very practical. It looks good. I like it. I can seat several people in it in comfort, even at distance. I can carry all my gear and rubbish on the back, which was the design really. Get the motorbikes on the back as well. So it does what I want it to do. If I've got any gripes, I would say, yes, probably the key system. The key system is one of these ones that, one of those ones that just has to be in your pocket. That's all well and good. However, I before now have handed the car over to somebody else, walked away with the key. There's been a bit of a beeping noise that could be anything, seat belts, etc., etc. And this the car has then driven off with the key in my pocket. Now, if that car had driven 300 kilometers, it would have still continued to drive, and when they'd have stopped the car, they wouldn't have been able to restart it. Now, neither have they got the key either. So I think Toyota probably need to have a look at this type of system, whereby maybe they need to have this type of key that just fits into a slot somewhere and the vehicle won't start without that, so that you know that the key and the vehicle are always going to be together. Now, cars are very subjective, aren't they? One man's meat, another man's poison. And obviously we buy cars for the use that they're going to do, the way in which we like their performance, the way in which we like their looks. This particular vehicle suits my purposes very well. I was after not necessarily a four-wheel drive, but I was after a vehicle with a raised sort of bit more ground clearance, if you like. The four-wheel drive is handy. It has got me out of a bit of a predicament. I live in central Queensland, and although it's dry an awful lot of the time, we do get a lot of flooding as well. As I mentioned to you right at the beginning, when it comes to cars, they are one man's meat, another man's poison. I particularly like this vehicle. I'm sure that there are users out there that don't like them, that hate them, same as any other vehicle. But it's a good truck for me. I like it. It will last me for a few years, hopefully. And so just hope this has been of some use to you. Maybe it has, maybe it hasn't, but hey, you know, we'll see you next time on Man Cave Maintenance.